This is a bit of a different kind of video from what you'd expect from me, but I decided that to commemorate the month of February and the fact that this month celebrates 5 years of me doing YouTube, I wanted to go ahead and do a few, I'd say more fun videos that I've wanted to do for quite a while but never really made sense to make. So I'm going to use this month to use the opportunity to do so, and I wanted to start off with a video that's probably going to be the most contentious, divisive and most difficult video to make in this channel's history, but I'm going to do it because we've got to set ourselves those high standards, and that is of course me ranking every Christopher Nolan movie from the worst to the best. And funny enough, there's actually 10 of them on this list, so if I wanted to be a right little clickbaity arsehole, I could just list it as top 10 Christopher Nolan movies if I want to be that much of a dickhead. But yeah, we're going to rank his movies from worst to best. Of course, most importantly, with any kind of ranking, especially when it comes to a man who's got an amazing filmography as Christopher Nolan, this list is my own opinion. This list is my of what I think his best movies are. If you have a different opinion to mine, let me know about it in the comment section down below. I'd really be interested to hear your thoughts on it. Now, in preparation for this, I have gone ahead and rewatched every single one of the movies on this list. I rewatched them all in January so that I could release this video in hindsight on these movies, because there are some films on this list that I have not seen in years until I rewatched them recently, so it has kind of given me a bit more clarity. And with that being said, let's get into every Christopher Nolan movie from the worst to the best. So at number 10 on the bottom of this list is pretty much the film that I think a lot of people will put at the bottom of their respective lists, and that is Following. This was his first movie that he made all the way back in, I believe, 1998, if I'm getting my dates correct. And I think this one is easily my least favourite film out of his. It's not a bad movie, it's still very good, very competently well made, especially for the budget that they had, and the fact that, you know, there was such a hectic schedule, because the fact that they basically made this film in their spare time, all the people involved, like, they could only shoot the movie on weekends apparently, like, that's how low budget it was. And I do respect him for that. There are a lot of nice things about this movie. I think the way that it's shot is very competent, and I think the acting for the most part is okay. But the reason it ranks very low on this list is I think it hasn't aged particularly very well. The runtime as well is very short, only about, what, 70 to 80 minutes long. It very much ends as soon as the film is starting to get interesting, and I think the runtime definitely hurts it in that aspect. Again, I can understand why it's so short, because of course this was his first movie and he didn't have a substantial budget, but the pacing as a result does suffer from the shorter runtime. And I think there's a few instances where the dialogue and the characters aren't particularly too great, but again, you kind of expect this from a director's first attempt at writing and directing a film. But for the most part, this is a competent movie, and if you're someone who has never seen this film, I would definitely recommend watching it, just because you can watch this film and kind of see where Nolan gets a lot of his early inspiration for, you know, later on that he'll use in his later films, you know, such as Memento or The Prestige or Interstellar or Inception, those kind of movies. I think it's a nice way to show how far he has come from his beginnings to what he's able to achieve now. So I think looking at it from that perspective, I could recommend watching this film, but is it a rewatchable movie? Probably not. But still good nevertheless, and that is why it is sadly bottom of this list at number 10. So at number 9 on this ranking, we have Insomnia. Now, I did actually want to put this one a little bit higher on the list, because I actually think Insomnia is a little bit underrated. I think there is a big gap in quality between Following and Insomnia. I think Insomnia is verging on a great movie, in my opinion. I really enjoyed this film. It's actually a remake of a foreign film with the same name, and I actually think this is better than the original version. I really like this film. I love the performances, especially from Al Pacino and Robin Williams. The dynamic between the two of them is fantastic. They play so well off one another. I also love the concept of this detective having to solve a murder mystery in a town where there is essentially 24/7 daylight, and of course, as the title would suggest, our main character ends up beginning to suffer with insomnia, and the way that Nolan films it in this movie is brilliant. It's really well done. Very suspenseful film, probably one of the most suspenseful movies that he's made in his entire filmography. My only real problems with this movie, and the reason I can't put it any higher, is because this is actually one of the few, in fact it might be the only movie in Nolan's filmography that he didn't actually write, because of course it's based on a previous film. And so because of that, I do feel like that does hinder this movie, because although it's got a lot of suspense going for it, so have a lot of his other films, but they also have these different elements to them, especially with the way they are directed and the themes and subtext within those films. I felt like that was a little bit lacking with this film, but again, I can understand why, since this is obviously a remake, and as a result it's not as original as it could be, because when you're basing it off a foreign film, you have to stay pretty close to what that film is trying to portray. And so because of that, I think that is in a way what kind of hurts this movie. Also, I do think the pacing at times is very slow, and there is a lot of moments where not a lot is really happening to progress the story, especially in the second act. The first act is pretty good, and the final act I think is fantastic, but the second act does have a few moments where it's very slow for me, and I did find it a bit difficult to get through on my first viewing. But this is still a really good movie. I still think it's heavily underrated, and I would definitely recommend watching this if you haven't seen any of Nolan's earlier works. At number 8, we've got a film that I actually did do a review for all the way back in 2017, and that is Dunkirk. I've had the chance to rewatch this film quite a few times, and I will say my opinion on the film has slowly gone down over each rewatch of it. This is not to say it's a bad movie. I still think it's one of the best war movies that's been made in recent memory. I've really loved the practicality of it. I mean, the fact that Nolan invested so much time and effort to make this film as practical as he did, the amount of IMAX footage that he was able to get in this film, because I did actually watch this in IMAX and it absolutely blew my mind. It's fantastic. I also like the fact that it does have a shorter runtime compared to his other films. I think it's only just under an hour and a half long. I love the way that they captured the horrors of what it must have been like to retreat from the beaches of Dunkirk all the way across the English Channel. They did that so well, and of course, since I'm English and I learned about this from a young age, the way that Nolan replicated this on screen is fantastic. It's so well done. And like I say, I think practicality wise and directing and cinematography, and especially the music by Hans Zimmer, again, fantastic. You're going to hear me say that a lot with a lot of Hans Zimmer's scores for Nolan's movies in this list, but I love the score for this as well. My only problems with the movie really come from a character standpoint, because this movie chooses to focus on the event rather than the characters, which I can understand because he wanted to prioritize the event, and I understand that because the event is very much the big talking point of Dunkirk. It's either viewed as this massive defeat or a massive victory, depending on who you ask at the time. But the decision to not focus on any characters or have a character that we basically see the perspective of the events through, as a result, I do find that this did hinder my rewatches of the film, because the action is great and all that, but that does, for me, slowly wear off after a while. It's the characters that I come back to, and I just don't feel like there was enough given to these characters, especially when there is barely any dialogue in this film. That doesn't help it at all. Still, like I say, I think this is a fantastic war movie. I think practically wise, it's absolutely stunning. I think it's a technically phenomenal movie. I think it's just a few script problems that are what hold it back from being amazing. But apart from that, I still think this is a great war movie, a definite watch. And like I say, one of the best war movies that we have had in recent memory. At number 7, we have quite a divisive Nolan movie, because I see a lot of people put this all over the place in their top 10 lists, and that is Interstellar. The weird thing with Interstellar was I still remember my screening of this film all the way back in 2014. Me, my mum and my dad went to the screening for this. And I remember walking out, and I think I was the only person who kind of walked out of that screening sort of understanding what had just happened, because my mum and dad, I remember, walked out and they said it was awful. I thought it was good, but then I went ahead and I watched it a second time because I was a bit confused on certain elements, and I think this is a very ambitious movie. Ambition is really the key word for this film, because it is very, very complex in a lot of the things that it does. This is definitely, I think, along with Inception, probably one of the more harder to follow Nolan movies. You do definitely have to be paying attention to this film to keep track of what's going on. But I really enjoyed this film. I think the main thing that I really liked about this was the brilliant relationship that they built between the main characters of Cooper and Murph, and that father and daughter relationship, and how well written it was. It was so well done. You see them interact when Murph is just a child, and then obviously Cooper goes away on this mission, and you see Murph grow up into this amazing person who still longs to try and find a connection with her dad. And it's so brilliantly well done. I think from an emotion standpoint, this is one of the most emotive movies that Nolan has made. There's a scene in this film where Matthew McConaughey's looking back at messages that his kids have sent him over the years, and honestly, the scene had me cry my eyes out in the cinema. It is brilliant. It's such a well-directed film. The score, I'm going to say this right now, I think this is the best score Hans Zimmer has ever done for a film. It's very closely followed by his score for Blade Runner 2049, but this is the best one for me. I love how unique it is, the way he uses his instrument, especially the church organ that he uses throughout the score. It's just so different and it's so euphoric. It's fantastically well done in this film. My only criticisms with the film really come from, I think, the fact that there are a few characters that I felt were a bit underdeveloped, especially Cooper's son. We barely see anything of him in the film. Like, you see a bit of him when he's a kid, played by young Timothy Chalamet, because I wish they'd added that same level of focus and detail with his character as they did with Murph's. I also think that the ending is a little bit too convenient. Not the actual ending itself, but the scenario that Cooper finds himself into, which ultimately, you know, helps with the mission. Again, I can't really spoil it because I don't want to spoil this film, but you'll know what I'm talking about. It's something that happens to him that I just found to be way too overly convenient, and it was very confusing in the cinema. It was one of the things when I watched it the first time that I had no idea what was going on, so I had to rewatch it again. Like I said, this is a film that I definitely do not think is for everyone. And I can definitely understand why people would put this movie lower on their respective lists, because, like I say, this is a film that will definitely divide people, but I personally really enjoyed Interstellar. I think it's a brilliant space movie. Like I say, a few problems with character development and some circumstantial events, but apart from that, I still think this is a great space movie. Again, very technically well made, some great performances, and a fucking god tier score by Hans Zimmer. And now at number 6, we have another controversial pick. It's like, I always say this is controversial because I'm so used for people putting this like literally right down at the bottom of their lists, and that is The Dark Knight Rises. Now, yes, I understand this movie is not the best in the Dark Knight trilogy. I know that for a fact. Yes, this movie has plot holes. Look, if you seriously went into this movie expecting it to be better than The Dark Knight or to be like a carbon copy, you were basically setting yourself up for disappointment. I remember walking into the cinema in 2012, pumped as hell for this movie, and I walked out damn satisfied. I really enjoyed The Dark Knight Rises. I mean, what this film really is it's not really much of a Batman movie. It's more of a Bruce Wayne film, which I absolutely loved because The Dark Knight was really an exploration on the morals of Batman. This film is about the moral exploration of Bruce Wayne and the fact that he really has never changed. He's been that same little boy since he fell in that well. And this movie is about getting him out of that well by himself and finding the courage within him to break free of his fear. I think this movie is actually pretty underrated because, like I say, I see so many people give this film hate, but I still think this is better than half of the superhero movies we get today. Christian Bale's Batman, absolutely brilliant. I'm going to say this again, he's still my favourite Batman. Look, I appreciate what Ben Affleck has done, but I just think the Batman that they wrote in this trilogy was fantastic, and the Bruce Wayne to go alongside him, especially with the amount of development he gets in this film, is fantastic as well. I also really love Tom Hardy as Bane. I really liked him as a villain. A very different kind of threat to what the Joker offered. The Joker was pretty much the embodiment of chaos, and Bane is really somebody, I just loved him as a villain. And like I say, Tom Hardy was fantastic. The supporting cast is as great as ever. I mean, you've got, of course, Gary Oldman, Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine. You got, you know, Anne Hathaway's Catwoman. The special effects and the action sequences are amazingly well done. The way that they ended this film, I know, is very divisive between some people. Some people don't like the fact of how this film ended. Some people do. I am in the camp that really likes it. I liked this ending. I thought it was a satisfying way to round off this trilogy. Like I say, it's not perfect and it's not the best installment in the trilogy, but I still think this is a damn good movie, and I would go as far as to call it a great movie in my opinion. And that is why it gets its spot at number 6. So I will probably have triggered a lot of people putting it this high, but I do not care. It goes at number 6 and it stays there. And at number 5, we have Inception. It's weird because when I first watched Inception, I didn't love it. I thought it was a really good movie, but I didn't love Inception because I think, like I say, similar to Interstellar, it's a very complex movie. It's a film that very much demands your attention when you watch it. And that can make or break the movie for people, but I really like that with Inception. I love the idea of a device that allows you to go inside someone's dream, but then you can basically go into a dream within a dream within a dream. It's a brilliant idea, and the way the film uses it is so good. Special effects wise, this was like groundbreaking stuff. I'd never seen stuff like this before in a film, and it truly blew my mind. The story, like I say, is very well told. Having this idea, like we say, of having this person who hires our main protagonist of Cobb, you know, to try and implant an idea within someone's mind. It's so brilliant, and the way that it's executed. The first 2 acts of this movie is basically them planning for said event. And the final act of this film is basically when they execute the plan. So in a way, it's basically a heist movie in someone's mind. And it's played out so well. And I think the main standout for me with this movie was the characters of Cobb and Mal. Those two characters are so brilliantly well written. Leonardo DiCaprio is great in this movie. And Marion Cotillard as his wife is again fantastic as pretty much everything she's in. And I just loved how those two characters were very well written in the film. They were so complex. And it was so brilliant. And like I say, the set pieces are fantastic. The score by Hans Zimmer, again, absolutely amazing. I mean, I must have listened to the Time track on the soundtrack probably goodness knows how many times, but it's absolutely fantastic. My only real negatives, and they've really come from a nitpick standpoint, is the fact that I do feel like a lot of the supporting cast do feel quite underwritten. But that is only really because by comparison to characters like I say, like Cobb and Mal, who get so much attention in this film, that they kind of slide under the rug a little bit. You know, characters like, you know, Arthur and Eames, the characters like them that really don't get enough attention in this film. There's also a lot of other characters as well. You have Ellen Page's character, who I don't think gets enough to do. Ken Watanabe doesn't really get much either. I just wish that, I guess that the focus on character and depth had been spread out a little bit more, and then it hadn't just have been the two integral characters of Cobb and Mal. I just wish that the others got a bit more story to them as well. Again, this is maybe kind of a nitpicky thing, but that's the thing. When you get to like the top tier end of Nolan's films, it's so hard to split between them. But like I said, I think if they had split it out a bit more, I think this movie would be higher up on this list. Because of that, it does sort of frustrate on further rewatches, and so because of that, it does diminish the film a little bit. But again, this is still a great Christopher Nolan movie, a great heist movie, and it's pretty much a Bond movie in disguise. So if you wanted a Bond movie where they invaded someone's mind, this is the movie for you. And now at number 4, we have Batman Begins. This is where the list starts to get very, very close to one another, because I think for me, from 4 onwards, all of these movies are straight up 10 out of 10s. Like, I'm not even kidding. The top 4 for me are 10 out of 10. And we get to number 4 with Batman Begins. I love this film. For a long time, and I don't know why, but for a long time, I genuinely thought that this movie was better than The Dark Knight. And I have no idea why. It's probably because I was a little kid, and you had all that first hour where it's Batman just training and me, someone being massively into martial arts. That's probably why. In some weird, sick way. But yeah, I really love Batman Begins. And the reason I think I have a lot of appreciation for it is that this movie had to do the impossible task of reviving Batman after Joel Schumacher absolutely killed him in the late 90s with Batman and Robin. And so this movie just has such an immeasurable task on its hands, and the way that it developed the character of Bruce Wayne, this movie can really be split into two. You have the first half of this film, which is basically the origin story. It's Batman, before he puts on the cape and cowl, him learning how to fight, how to become the Shadow, how to become a legend, you know, being trained by Ra's al Ghul. And then the second half of this movie is where he becomes Batman, and he's going around Gotham, you know, fighting crime. And the way that this film is done is fantastic. Like I say, the performances are great. Christian Bale, already mentioned, fantastic. Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, fantastic as well. I love him in this movie. And I just, like I say, I love how this movie played out as basically two films kind of put into one. But I just loved how well they were submerged with one another. I also love Cillian Murphy, my boy Cillian. I love him in anything. I love him in Peaky Blinders. I love him here as Scarecrow. Just a shame he couldn't have played Batman. I really just love everybody in this movie. I even loved Katie Holmes in this film. Like, I didn't think Katie Holmes was bad. I know she's probably the one thing that some people criticize about this movie, but I actually like Katie Holmes. I didn't think she was bad in this film. I just love this movie so much. Like I say, just as a Batman movie, it's fantastic, but as a film on itself, I still think it is phenomenal. And the fact that, like I say, this basically kicked off this new wave of comic book movies where they didn't have to be all lighthearted. They could be serious. They could be grounded and gritty. And I mean, yeah, that brought us some shitty comic book movies in the process, but if it wasn't for this film, this wouldn't have laid the foundation for things like The Dark Knight, or even other, you know, darker, more mature comic book movies like Logan or Captain America Winter Soldier. This movie is really the birth point of that, and for that it gets a lot of respect from me, but in itself as a film, it's also bloody amazing, and that is why it gets in at number 4. Where are you?
Here.
So, coming in at number 3, and on the bronze position of this ranking list, is, of course, Memento. This was the movie, really, that made Christopher Nolan a big household name. Without this movie, he would never have gotten the opportunity to do INSOMNIA, which would have never given him the opportunity to do Batman Begins, and so on and so forth. So this is really the movie that kicked it off for him. I think this is a masterful psychological thriller. This is a 10 out of 10 easily. Like with Batman Begins, this is a 10 out of 10 movie, and it is genuinely phenomenal. The amazing thing of this film is how well it holds up still to this day. This film is, what, 19 years old? There's even a remake of this movie going around, which personally I am 1,000,000% against, but I think this movie has aged phenomenally. The storytelling in this, of having somebody with anterograde amnesia who can't create new memories, trying to solve a murder mystery in of itself, and the way that the film plays out, it's beautiful. It's so damn original, you know, showing these events in reverse chronological order, so you're seeing scenes play back to front, and then you have these black and white sequences that are playing normally, and the way they converge at the end is fantastic. I really want to know how this film was conceived script-wise, because it's absolutely fantastic. The performances here are great as well. Guy Pearce, for me, this is his best performance. He's brilliant in this film as Leonard. I also really love Carrie-Anne Moss in this. In fact, all of the cast in this film are great. Every single character is fantastic, because they are written in a way where you might perceive them as one way, but with the way that the film plays out, and you discover what these characters have done before we initially see them on the screen, and you realise who these people actually are, it's brilliant. It's brilliant filmmaking. I think this is, like I say, generally one of the best psychological thrillers ever made. It's brilliant. It is a damn masterpiece. And again, I feel like there's a lot of people who haven't seen this film who are Nolan fans because, you know, oh, it's an old movie, I don't want to go watch it. Seriously, guys, watch this movie. It is brilliant. And when you watch this movie and you get to its ending, you'll instantly want to go ahead and rewatch it again. It's an absolute masterpiece. And that's why it gets itself at number 3 on the list.
Do I lie to myself to be happy? In your case, Teddy, yes, I will.
So, the top 2, these were really difficult, because like I say, the top 4 are all 10 out of 10s. The top 2 really hold a special place in my heart. These are genuinely, if I was to make a top 10 list of the best films of all time, these 2 would be in that list. They are that great. And separating them was quite difficult, but I came to a decision at the end. You'll know what these 2 movies are based on, you know, process of elimination. But at number 2, I'm going to go with The Dark Knight, the best superhero movie of all time. Do not even at me, don't even send shit in the comment section down below. It's a fact. This movie is not just the best comic book movie of all time. It's one of the best movies of all time, because it revolutionized the way that superhero storytelling could be done. This, in a way, doesn't feel like a superhero film. This feels like a crime thriller, because it genuinely does. The way they make this world feel so realistic, and everything, you know, related to the Batman lore and integrating it into this realistic world is brilliant. The cinematography is fantastic in this movie. The performances, like I say, Bale, once again, fantastic. But of course, Heath Ledger as the Joker, one of the greatest performances of all time in cinematic history. Absolutely fantastic. Also, Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent, I think, is very underappreciated. He's brilliant in this film, with the way that his character is at the start and the way he ends up at the end. His arc in this film is fantastic, and Aaron Eckhart is fantastic in this role. All the supporting cast are fantastic as well. And I love how this film sets up its themes of Batman being the representation of order, the Joker's the representation of chaos, and having these 2 go at each other. It's brilliant filmmaking, so well done. So many, you know, thematic layers to it, which you just don't see in other superhero films. And most importantly, it doesn't end on a fucking skybeam. It doesn't. There is no end the world scenario at the end of this film. This is a battle throughout this entire movie for the soul of Gotham and for its citizens and its ideology. Batman trying to teach them all about order, the Joker telling them to embrace the chaos. It's brilliant filmmaking. There are so many scenes in this film that are just like cinematic landmarks that everyone remembers. You know, the interrogation scene, you know, the why so serious scene. There's so much in this film that is so memorable. It's one of the most rewatchable films for me ever. It's brilliant. It's a masterpiece. Keep on saying it, but it's the best comic book movie of all time. It's a true masterpiece. This is definitely where Nolan reached his peak in terms of attention, because this movie made everyone realise, shit, comic book movies need to be taken seriously. I think the biggest sin of all time was that this film did not get nominated for Best Picture. That was a true crime against humanity. But I love this film with all my heart. It's a brilliant movie, but it doesn't quite make it to number one, because there is one film that I think, for me, is just that little bit better, just a little bit better than The Dark Knight. But this is still a fantastic movie and easily deserving of number 2 on this list. It'd make the number 1 on most lists of like other directors' filmography, but it was very close. But The Dark Knight, brilliant film.
He missed!
So now we're getting to number 1. You know, by process of elimination, you know what this film is. It is, of course, The Prestige. This film is so underrated that it actually makes me sad. The Prestige was this film that I remember when I watched it the first time, I really didn't know what to think going in. It didn't seem that interesting from a premise standpoint. I mean, I was excited by the cast, but that was really about it with this film, and obviously the director. But by the end of my first viewing of the film, I instantly wanted to go back and rewatch it, and every subsequent rewatch of this film has made it better. One of those movies where you truly learn something new each time you watch this film. I think I've now rewatched the film about maybe 7 or 8 times, and it's got to the point now where I think this is a masterpiece, and I think this is Christopher Nolan's best and his most underrated movie. Not enough people have seen this film. It's brilliant. The way that Nolan directs the film as if he himself is a magician, the way he frames the camera and scenes where he's deliberately putting spoilers on screen for things that will happen later in the film, but you're not paying attention to it because he shows you something else. He distracts you with something else, just like how a magician does with a trick. It's brilliant filmmaking. The characters of Angier, played by Hugh Jackman, and Borden, played by Christian Bale, and the way these characters evolve throughout the film is brilliant. The fact that you're always constantly questioning the other's motives, whether they are the hero or the villain of the story, they're so complex and so well written. There's also so many other great characters in this film. Michael Caine as Cutter is fantastic. Scarlett Johansson in this film is brilliant. I think this is one of her most underrated roles, most definitely. The cinematography is fantastic. The music by David Julian, I think, is so underrated as well. This is a brilliant score. But it belongs in a horror movie, but it fits so well with the film. And, I want to talk so in depth about this movie, but I will actually say that I am planning to do a video very in-depth related to this film, because I genuinely think it's that good. So I will reserve a lot of my points that I have for The Prestige when that video comes out. But all you need to know is that this is a true masterpiece of a film. You definitely, I'm going to reckon that probably 70% of the people watching this have not seen The Prestige. I implore you to watch this film. It's a masterpiece. It's a true brilliant feat in storytelling, some phenomenal performances, and by the end of this film you will want to watch it again. Count me on that. It is brilliant, and it is easily deserving of the number 1 spot on this list of Christopher Nolan's movies.
And? I'm sorry, I just don't know.
You don't know?
I'm sorry.
You don't know? You don't know?
So thank you all very much for watching this video. I know it's a very, very long video to get through. I hope you guys appreciated my list. Like I said at the start, I would love to know what your ranking is of Nolan's movies from worst to best. Did you agree with my picks? Do you disagree with some of them? Let me know all about that down below. And if you, more importantly, if you enjoy these kinds of videos, please go ahead and tell me about that as well in the comments, or leave a like on the video. It'd be very much appreciated. I might consider, doing more of these in the future if you guys want this. So thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Leave a like on the video and share it around with all your friends. And that being said, I hope to see you all again for the next video.